All right, are we ready to proceed? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. My name is John Blatherwick. I'll be chairing this hearing with me today, and with me are my fellow panel members, Heather McLean, Bonnie Oak Charan, and Colin White. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development in the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposal that are not related to the required variances. Noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of the relief required, a recirculation of the application is required. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. And we don't have those for any of the applications today. So we'll have to read or applicants or other agents will have to undertake the oath or solemn declaration to proceed with their application. Regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will be paused to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing of the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that the committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for a brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where additional clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we will ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address. For the record, we may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision and to all parties and those who have requested it, a written notice of decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. Decisions of the Committee of Adjustment may be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee within 20 days of the date of the written decision. Only the applicant, the City of Ottawa, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, a specified person, and certain public bodies that have an interest in the matter may appeal the decision. Specified persons and certain public bodies include public utilities, but do not include an individual or a community association. Before we begin, just look at this. I note that there's no minutes to confirm. There's no other business. Do any of the members present today have a conflict with anything on our agenda today or the agendas of the other two panels that are meeting today? No? Okay. So first we'll deal with request for adjournment. And there is a request from adjournment for item 4, 65 Acacia Avenue. And this is an application to permit reduced lot area and reduced front yard setback for the construction of 3-story low-rise apartment building containing 6 residential units. And the request for adjournment, it came from the Planning, Real Estate and Economic Development Department. Ms. Planner there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff requests an adjournment sine die because we believe that there are additional minor variances that are required to accommodate the subject development.
I noticed that there's a fairly substantial list of variances that you've identified.
Yes, the subject site went through a zoning bylaw amendment for a previous site plan control file. Okay. However, I don't believe that project is being pursued. So this is not consistent with the urban exception that was placed to accommodate the previous project.
Okay. I think Mr. Robinson is the agent for the applicant.
Yes, good afternoon. The site-specific exceptions in the zoning that were subject to that previous zoning amendment application applied to this property and the property next door, which are owned by the same property owners. So there's nothing in the wording for that in that site-specific zoning that says that if only one of the two properties is subject to an application, that different the standard requirements apply. So what Ms. Linker has identified is, and I've discussed this with her, variances that would be required as if this was to be considered for the entire, this parcel and the parcel next door, which then triggers a side yard setback variance and a couple of rear yard variances. It removes the front yard setback variance, and to be discussed is the front yard amenity area. So we're getting the application ready to resubmit, and we're in agreement with the sine die adjournment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robinson. I believe one of the area neighbors would like to speak to this application, Ms. Falsetto. Is she there?
I don't see her on the call, Mr. Chair. All
right. Okay. All right. Well, with that then, Mr. Robinson and the planning department, we will, you're both agreed to a sine die adjournment. All in favor of the adjournment sine die on this particular application? Right. Your application is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah. We'll now move into the regular order today. And the first applications we will deal with are items 1 and 2 on the agenda. These are applications for 2 Spruce Street and 12 Spruce Street. These are applications to create easement right-of-ways to facilitate vehicular and pedestrian access to the rear yard for the adjacent property at 4 Spruce Street and the adjacent property at 10 Spruce Street. And I believe Ms. Libman is the agent for the applicant.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Libman, we'll do the oath or solemn declaration first. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. We note that your firm had objections to the conditions imposed and that those conditions have been removed. So I'm assuming that your objections to the conditions have been deleted.
Happily, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you could just very briefly explain to us what you're requesting.
Sure. Maybe I've provided a presentation. Maybe that could come up on the screen, but we can actually.
You can do it very quickly. This is pretty simple.
Slide 7.
Yeah.
We can jump to, yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is the draft reference plan, and it shows the building at the top on parts 1, 6, 10, 12, 14, and 18.
Yep.
And the requested rights of way are over part 3 and over part 20. This would allow the drivers of vehicles that are going to be parking on part 7 and 8 and on part 15 and 16 to drive straight through from either Booth Street or from the side lane over parts 3 and 4 into parts 7 and 8 and over part 20 and 21 into part 15 and 16.
Okay. Okay, so that's the application. We note that the planning department has no concerns with the application.
Correct.
No comments from any of the other agencies. There are obviously there's no comments from any of the neighbors. So any questions from the members of the panel regarding this? Mr. White, I believe.
Mr. Chair, just want to apologize. Appears my video is having problems, so I'm out of the video, but I'm listening to the full aspects of the meeting. No questions on this application. I'm glad to see that the conditions have been dropped. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. You're identified, Mr. White, by the big C in the brown square.
I'd know him anywhere.
Huh? Yeah, it's a real marker, huh? All right. So in regards to this, these requests for consent for the easement, all in favor of these? Mr. White, hands up. All right. Your applications are approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome. The application we'll hear is item 3 on the agenda, 248 Main Street. These are applications to permit a reduced rear yard setback and area and permit a front yard driveway for 1 parking space for the construction of a new duplex dwelling. And the applicant is Mr. Alan Ibrahim. Is he there?
Yes, so it's actually Andrea Ibrahim and my brother Alan is also here, but I'll be speaking mostly and he can join if he needs to.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Ibrahim. Before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I confirm.
Okay. And we note that there have been several revisions to your application, revised plans filed on the 26th of January 2023, which
Correct.
revises the rear balcony. I'm assuming this is the second floor balcony to project only 1.2 meters, where it originally projected at a 1.83 meter distance.
That's correct. That was the only change in addition to just the wording of the third variance.
Okay. And a streetscape character analysis was submitted by you on the again on the 30th of January 2023.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And is the planner there? Can the planner speak to the SCA, please?
Can you hear her? I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm the only one that can't hear her speak.
There's no sound at the present moment.
Okay, because I see your lips are moving, but
Is it okay like that?
That's a little better. If you could turn the volume up a touch, please.
Sorry for that.
That's okay.
Okay, so they were asking for a permission to reduce the rear yard setback and consequently the rear yard area, and to allow relief from the zoning bylaw to permit a front yard parking space, where the bylaw states that a front yard parking space is not permitted where it's not determined to be a dominant character by the streetscape character analysis.
Okay, and what did this streetscape character analysis indicate?
It's ABA, which doesn't have a front garage.
Okay. All right. And you, the department's position regarding the rear yard reduction?
No, no concerns.
And the front yard parking space?
The department has some concerns with the request. While staff typically would oppose the front yard parking space due to the direction in the official plan, but it was recognized that in this particular instance that there is an already existing driveway that was used as a parking on the proposed duplex reduced, and also we recognize that they are providing aggregated software scape in the front yard, which is it's desirable and emphasizing the intent of the official plan.
Okay. You should note that that existing driveway is a side yard driveway and not a front yard driveway. And with the redevelopment of the site, it is transformed into a front yard parking space.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Ibrahim. If you'd like to give us a brief presentation on your request, please.
Yeah, sure. I'll just wait for the slides to come up.
Okay. There we go.
Perfect. So very briefly, as you mentioned, we have requesting 3 minor variances. The first being the rear yard setback reduced to 6.25 meters, which results in a reduced rear yard area of 62.68 meters squared. And as we are building out the side yard into the existing driveway, which by still keeping the side yard setback of 1.2 meters, we are requesting a legal partial front yard parking in the section of the driveway that still remains. So as you can see, it is set in a little bit from the front line of our property. So it's not fully in front of our proposed house. Next slide. Just very briefly how we meet the 4 tests. Well, firstly, we're proposing a modest intensification, which also maintains the environmental integrity of the lot. So we're proposing 2 decent sized units for my brother and I to live in, which is in a better condition that is currently established today without causing any environmental impact. Secondly, it keeps the existing land use pattern compatible with the surrounding properties, which are all low rise, single or duplex houses. And so we promote efficient land use and desirable intensification while maintaining similar soft landscape as planning mentioned. Thirdly, our proposal is appropriate for the development of the use of this land and keeps with the existing residential use. So we're really just asking for a partial relief of the zoning bylaw provisions in a manner that still respects the character and existing built-in environment of the area. So our proposal does not propose anything different than how the land is currently used today. And then we with respect to the 4th test, the first 2, sorry, just back to the first one. The first 2 requests are minor as they maintain an acceptable amount of green space and distance of the rear lot line, which is a lot more than the proposals that are currently being approved under TM7 zoning on Main Street. The mass and height remain in keeping with the surrounding properties. They do not affect sunlight, privacy, or views of the abutting properties. And this actually has been fully supported by the planning department. The 3rd request is also considered minor because there's an existing paved driveway on our property and Main Street has recently underwent streetscape renovation. So this implies that the request for the partial front yard surface parking already exists and will have no effect on Main Street or the pedestrian sidewalk during or after construction. And we also note that there's a curb streetscape in front of our house. And so there's even more distance from the end of our laneway to the sidewalk and then also to the busy Main Street. Next. So our overall proposal is compatible with the established built form and character of the neighborhood. As you can see by the streetscape character analysis that we conducted, the dominant character, as planning mentioned, was ABA. A meaning no garage in the front, which we do not have. B meaning a driveway or a shared driveway, which we do still have. And then a front door on the front facade, which we also do have. Next slide. So this is just to show you 2 doors down from our lot. north and south, so on each side, there are examples of people who are parking their car in front, which don't have an existing side yard driveway. And then just down the street some more, you'll see 3 additional examples of how cars are parking directly in front of their house. And so they're not set back like ours is proposing. And so this is something that currently exists on the street. While our block is very short, that's why only 4 houses counted in our streetscape. You can see this by just driving down a couple doors down. Next slide.
And those parking spaces are probably all illegal.
Yes, I understand. And that's why we are proposing to do this in a legal way and following all the rules.
Okay.
So I appreciate that comment. Again, these are some more just down the street. And like you mentioned, whether they have a garage or a side yard driveway, they are still parking in front of their house. And we think that the way that we've designed ours is much more desirable than this. This was just taken last week. So you can see in a snowy climate, it's not super desirable. Next slide.
Sounds like the planning department needs to call building code services.
And this is just to kind of show you a quick rendering of before and after. You know, we have gotten only positive comments about the look of it and how it really keeps the existing character of the house, which has this nice soft roof, peaked roof and a white exterior. So we think it's very in keeping with the existing character of the neighborhood.
Okay.
So that's all I have for initial presentation. I do have additional slides if there are any questions that I'll just reserve for afterwards if they come up.
Just going through our responses to the application. Conservation Authority has no comments. Standard response from Hydro Ottawa, which you're no doubt aware of. We have several comments from neighbors, neighbors directly behind you, and another neighbor on Glenora, and the Old Ottawa East Community Association. And I believe we have requests to speak from both the neighbors directly behind you and the Old Ottawa East Community Association. But before we start, Ms. Auchan, questions, comments?
Thank you. My question is about the front yard parking following your presentation. When I look at the site plan, it's a lot of lot coverage, and that parking spot covers even more of the lot. Would it be fair to say that if the parking spot were not there, that would be, that you could use that for additional soft landscaping or trees?
I don't think it's fair to say that there'd be room to plant another tree there. In fact, if it wasn't there, we would be making the we would be adding it to our floor plan. So I think that, like the city mentioned, we actually have a very reasonable amount and more than required soft landscaping in the front yard. And we are keeping a very decent amount in the backyard as well. So I think that it's fair to say that it's a very small amount of driveway, and it's a reasonable approach and just what we need. You know, it is going to be 2 units, and we're only asking for 1, which is in keeping with the city's plan as well. So I appreciate that comment, and that's what I would say about that.
All right, thank you.
Ms. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the rear yard reduction. What would be the impact that would occur if you weren't approved the rear yard reduction? In other words, why do you need that rear yard reduction?
We need the rear yard reduction to be able to get a decent sized units for the both of us. We are, again, only proposing 2-bedroom and 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom for 2 young professionals to live in, that we think is very reasonable, and that extra space it really adds to it and makes this a decent place and better than what exists there today. Otherwise, we wouldn't be changing it. So there's still such a decent amount of space. There's room to plant trees. We're not using it for parking instead, which was actually part of a lot of TM7 zoning and in a past plan that we had. So we really think that it's a modest ask to improve the lifestyle and quality of life that we can have in this building. And my dad just wants to mention something.
I would like, hi, my name is Nicholas Ibrahim. I'm the father of these young people. And the city requested that we do a stacked units instead of long semis. The long semis would have done away with the additional space at the back required. But because it's a stacked unit, there has to be enough space, and the distance from the front of the building to the sidewalk, it also dictates how many square feet we could build on. And the reason the city requested that we do stacked unit made it a requirement to have the extra additional space on the floor plan. So that's one of the reasons why the extra space required in the back. Thank you.
Can you tell me what's along the rear lot line? Is there any buffering, a hedge or a tree or fencing? And the second part is, are you proposing a secondary dwelling unit in the basement?
So currently there is a fence that is there. There are no, big, large trees directly in the rear. There is south of the property that's actually on our neighbor's lot. And then, sorry, your second question was?
Whether you're proposing a secondary dwelling unit in the basement.
Oh, yes. As of right now, we are not, because it wasn't permitted. So it's just going to be a finished basement. We have a mechanical room for the main floor in the basement right now to, again, save some more floor space. So as of right now, that is not our intention. It'll just be a finished basement for storage and like I mentioned, the mechanical room.
And I guess my final question is, will the rear of your dwelling line up with anything, the abutting properties? I noticed one site plan, there was one dwelling shown. I guess beside you is a vacant lot.
Yeah, so
you appear to be projecting into the rear yards on that block. And I'm just wondering, is there any other dwellings of that type?
Actually, our 246 Main Street, our north neighbor also has a porch that goes into their backyard, and more, I'm not sure if that was your question. However, yes, there is an empty lot next to us that is owned by 250 Main Street. So I think they've been severed into one lot, or combined into one lot. And then more north down, as I mentioned, a lot of the new buildings that have gone up, they all encroach on the rear yard. In fact, I think that's what the Old Ottawa East Association brought up, was that less new developments are having green space in the back. However, we are the only one that is keeping it green, and the rest are proposing parking and a bunch of other, garbage rooms or bicycle racks and that kind of stuff. So I believe that we're actually maintaining a very nice amount of soft landscaping, and our balconies are projecting over it. So there's still green space under that we're keeping, which is in keeping with our neighbors and way more than any of the new proposed sites that have been going up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further, Ms. Abraham?
I'll just actually like to speak a little bit too, if my slides can go back up, but I'll just speak 1 minute about what we've kind of been through at this lot. So my brother and I purchased this. If you can just go to slide 8, please. My brother and I purchased this home in December 2019. Sorry, one slide before. We took ownership in 2019. The pandemic hit while we were going through many architect meetings. We did a pre-consult meeting with the city in October 2020. We initiated all the studies that they wanted for a site plan control. We're talking, tens and 20s and 30s of thousands of dollars on noise, geotechnical, civil studies. architect meetings. We submitted a site plan control for a 3-story mixed-use building under the new TM7 zoning. We got site plan approval after 3 rounds of revisions, not knowing what we were doing and what we were getting into. And then once we got into building permit review, we were told that our building height, which was 3 stories, was too high compared to our neighbors. It was going to cause some issues. We were going to have to get a structural engineer to conduct more studies and then reinforce their house, which they would have to, abide by and be approval in agreement of. So this just made us step back and refocus on what our plan was, which was to get a unit for myself and one for my brother, where we can finally move to Main Street, a street that means a lot to us. My dad sitting next to me built 164 Main Street, the first mixed-use building on the street with the new TM7 zoning. We drove the street every single day to university. We've taken the bus down the street. We've biked, walked. We're just ready after 3 long years to finally be able to call this place our home. And so that's where we are. We're at this point where we're asking for minor variances to be able to build something close to what we had intended to, that we could live in as 30-something, young professionals born and raised in Ottawa. And just a quick look at the next slide. This is what we had proposed. This was approved. This did not have to go through public hearing. There would have been parking in the back. There would have been no green space. You can see by the site plan how much more green space we have in this proposal in comparison. And, it looks a bit awkward, actually, now that I see it, compared to all of the neighbors' houses. And so if we actually go back to slide 6, where it showed our new proposed duplex, it's so much more in keeping with the character, and it's just a much more modest and classic kind of approach to this that I think benefits the city, benefits Main Street, benefits all of the neighbors, and benefits my brother and I as the owners. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other comments from panel members, questions? Right. I believe we have the Old Ottawa East Community Association who'd like to say a few words. Mr. Dance, are you there? I see your name, but I don't hear you and see you. All right, Mr. Dance is having problems connecting. We also have a Miss Allen and Mr. Tunnicliffe, who are the neighbors directly behind your property, who wish to speak. Is either Miss Allen or Mr. Tunnicliffe there?
Hi, it's just Christiane Allen. My husband is unable to join today.
Okay. Your address is 171 Glenora?
171 Glenora, that's right.
And you're directly behind. Okay.
Thanks very much. And I'm delighted to meet my new neighbors, Andrea and Alan. Thank you very much for your application. And I have to start by acknowledging that it is a vast improvement, as you've said yourself, over the previous application. And I empathize with what you've been through to date. My one concern, and it is a significant concern, at least for us, is the resulting impact on privacy because of the balcony. I acknowledge that you have reached out to me. I'm sorry I wasn't able to write back to you, but I knew that this meeting was coming up. So the balcony, the fact that you've asked for the rear yard setback to be reduced really poses no significant problem in my mind. I think the fact that you're adding landscaping rather than parking is also a bonus, but the balcony does pose a problem for the very reason that the backyard setback is reduced, and that now with the balcony, the effective setback is reduced from the legal, I think it's 9 and a bit meters, to effectively half of that. I recognize that you've gone back and revised your plans to again, reduce the depth of the balcony, which is appreciated. But ultimately, its existence at all still poses, I think, basically a risk to privacy in the backyard, because it does hover, above our backyard and close to our backyard, limiting privacy even more. So I wanted to lodge that concern. I recognize that the unit may be required to have outdoor amenity or outdoor access. I had made a proposal, an alternate proposal of putting that in the front and thereby, providing access to the living space in the building rather than to, or in that unit rather than to the bedroom space. I'm not sure whether that proposal for a front yard balcony might be acceptable, but I wanted to make it. And just acknowledge, again, the design is an improvement except for that balcony. So if the setback reduction is to be given, then my one request would be to impose this condition of no balcony. If the outdoor amenity is required, then vastly reducing the depth of the balcony so as to limit its use as, common use entertainment kind of balcony that would restrict the privacy of our backyard. Other than that, I think really those are my comments. And again, I am keen to be neighborly about this, and I acknowledge that it has been a long road and that the design is a vast improvement. So I thank you for that.
Thanks for your input. Just for your information, that balcony is a permitted projection. And it really isn't before us today. The rear yard reduction is. I echo your concerns with loss of privacy. That is a definite issue when you have people at the second floor level looking directly over your fence into your backyard.
Can I just comment though, in terms of permitted projection, Mr. Chair? It does effectively reduce the setback even more because
it's still a permitted projection, ma'am. They're allowed to do what they're doing. So that balcony is really not before us. I can ask Ms. Ibrahim to respond. I mean, she has the option of putting a Juliet balcony in there, which would still allow for some view over the backyard, but would not be a horizontal space off the back of the building. But that balcony is off a bedroom, not off a kitchen or living room.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as I mentioned, actually, and it's nice to meet you virtually, but as I mentioned in my email to you, all the reasons why we chose that and to have a outdoor space, and it's coming off of our bedroom. It's meant to, read a book and not look into your backyard, but although I do appreciate your concern. Also, we did reduce it. So you mentioned a last resort condition of wanting it to be around 1 meters of depth. We reduced it to 1.2. Which we think was a very reasonable compromise. And we did that only to satisfy your concerns. And actually the diagonal at 173 Glenora, he mentioned the same thing and he was happy with our reduction. He responded to me right away and was very supportive of the application. So I really, really do appreciate it. For all the reasons I mentioned in my email of why we chose it there and how we plan to use this, I hope that you could consider that as well. And as the Mr. Chair mentioned, the setback is where our lot line is in the allowed projection. You don't get to kind of say that is the new setback. It's an allowed projection, and we hope to be neighborly about it.
And that's a glass wall on the periphery of the balcony on the second floor.
It will be. However, I do note that bylaw does require privacy screens on the sides. So I think that's also why our side neighbors had no issue with it. So we will abide by all the privacy bylaws that are required for second floor balconies. So
and how high do the privacy screens have to be on the north and the south side?
From my understanding of the bylaw, it's 1.5 meters, so it's pretty high.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that at the balcony, the front edge of the west side of the balcony, that won't be a 1.5 meter glass wall. It'll be lower than that.
Yeah, so actually they have to be opaque on the sides. So again, when we go through building services, we're going to be abiding by all these rules. So yeah, thank you.
So, and in the plans that we have, are those design details there?
I don't think so. We haven't gotten that far, but in discussing this, I've been in close contact with someone from the building code services. So these things have been brought to my attention, and we're just being in close communication with them to speed up the process once we hopefully get to building permit.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Allen?
Well, I just, again, my understanding, sure, that it's a permitted projection, but that it should be a consideration that that does effectively reduce the setback even further. So when you consider the setback.
I believe Ms. McConnell had her hand up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sure you're aware of this ability, but just to point out that the committee, if they so desired to address those balcony concerns, there's an option to move forward with variances conditional upon the submission of any revised plans to address issues that are before you. And the department would have no issues with those.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I believe we have Mr. Dance online.
Yes, sir. Yes, Madam, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity.
And your address for the record, Mr.
Oh, right,
Dance?
68 McNaughton Avenue, Ottawa East, Old Ottawa East.
Okay. So as far as the Old Ottawa East Community Association is concerned.
Yes. First off, the applicants have gone through a lot, and they've got a good proposal before you, and we really appreciate all they've done and modifications and listing. Our one primary concern is the rear yard setback. And our preference, frankly, would be that it be consistent with what would have been allowable under the TM7, which is considerably less than what the R3P allows. So, and our concern here is, I mean, it's not so much directed at these applicants that have worked so hard on it, is really directed at the precedent of what happens elsewhere in Maine and Hawthorne, where we have seen a lot of requests for rear yard setbacks. And, you know, every time we say yes to something like this, we end up, you know, sort of regretting it, or supporting something like this, we end up regretting, because somebody with 6 stories comes along and say, oh, well, there's a variance granted for a reduced rear yard there, so therefore we should have it. So that's our concern. But that said, I know how hard the applicants have worked on this one. I just wish they would consider, perhaps the committee itself consider that it adhere to what would have been the case for the rear yard setback for TM7, which, as I say, is substantially less than what R3P is. So that's my only point, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And the setback for TM7, Mr. Dance, would be what?
It's 7.5.
Okay.
Anyway, that's the only thing we had, but I wish them all the best in this effort and look forward to being neighbors.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dance. Any further comments from the members of the committee? Concerns? And to wrap up, Ms. Ibrahim, final comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I think what we will do after hearing what we have heard is reserve on this application. And we will discuss this after the end of the public portion of the meeting. And you will receive our notice of decision within 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next application before us today is item 5 on the agenda, 173 Breeze Hill Avenue North. And this is an application to subdivide the property into 2 parcels of land to create separate ownership for each half of the existing semi-detached dwelling. And the agent for the applicant is Tamara Nahal. Is she there?
The agent is Jacob Bolduc.
Pardon me? Mr. Bolduc, are you there?
He's present.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I am here, but my colleague Tamara is supposed to lead this presentation. I just think she hasn't been promoted to panelist.
There we go.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Hello, committee.
Yes, now, before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do so swear.
Okay. So this is an application to subdivide an existing semi. Please, just very briefly, please explain the consent request.
Absolutely. So as you've mentioned, it's an existing semi-detached dwelling. The proposal is to sever the property. We've submitted a consent to sever, and there's also an easement associated with this application. The intent of the easement is to preserve access to an existing parking space behind the interior lot, that the retained interior lot, and the easement would be part of that. That's the short explanation.
Okay, and we note that there are a number of, well, the Conservation Authority has no comment, Hydro Ottawa no comments, the planning department has no concerns with the application. Ministry of Transportation, standard stuff. You're within X number of meters of a major highway, so you need a permit required prior to construction and or alteration. All you're doing is severing, so I think you've managed to dodge that one.
Yes, that's correct.
The requested conditions, and there are 5 that we have, and we're adding one. Independent services, a 3.3 meter corner site triangle at Gladstone and Breezehill, joint use and maintenance agreement, an agreement on title for noise within 500 meters of an LRT line, and an agreement on title for noise within 500 meters of Highway 417 and the City Works Yard at 175 Loretta. And as we normally do, we're adding condition number 6, the party wall certification for this application.
Okay. We've reviewed the other conditions that have been provided. We have no issues with them and no issues with the additional condition you've just noted.
And your client is comfortable with the 3.3 meter taking of that site triangle?
We've reviewed the survey. We don't foresee any issues with the site triangle as the house is existing. And I don't believe our clients identified any concerns with it yet. And we haven't identified any as well.
All right. Any comments or questions from the members of the panel? Ready to make a decision? Okay. All in favor of the consent for 173 Breezehill Avenue? Okay. Your application's approved.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Next application we'll deal with this afternoon is item number 6 on the agenda, 509 Roosevelt Avenue. And this is an application to permit a reduced interior side yard setback and increased driveway width and no landscaping strip for the construction of a carport on the existing 2-story dwelling. And the agent for the applicant is a Mr. Matthew Pimenter. Is he there? All right, before we begin, sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. And for the committees, I'm a little curious regarding variance C in the driveway width from 3 to 4 meters. Is that an existing condition?
Yes, sir, it is.
So it's already a 4 meter wide driveway.
From the front of the house to the sidewalk, yes.
Okay. And I think Mr. White had a question regarding an apparent discrepancy in a measurement. Mr. White, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
You can't see me, but I hope you can hear me. Just a question about the, there seems to be a discrepancy or difference between the dimension that's provided for the distance from the outside of the existing building to the property line. On the survey, it's indicating a dimension of 2.97 meters. And then on the proposed site plan, it's showing a dimension of 2.99 meters. It's not a significant difference, but when we're going down to a proposal that's going down to a zero lot line, it might be significant. Can I get some background or explanation as to why that discrepancy?
Yeah, I believe it's an error that was made by our architect in drafting his plans. The survey would be the dominant, the most accurate document, and for whatever reason, maybe he's typed the number in incorrectly, or maybe he measured in feet and converted it incorrectly, but I would defer to the survey.
So the site plan then will have to be amended to show that difference to the 2.97 meter dimension as opposed to the 2.99. Now, if you carry that dimension back, assuming the wall is straight, the proposed, where the posts are located along the property line, there'll have to be a slight difference between the width of the front and the width of the rear, unless you move the rear posts into the same 2.97 dimension, which means to me that your request would be reducing the variance requirement by 0.02 meters. Am I correct on that? Mr. Chair, if you follow me on that.
I'm getting a little confused, I must admit. I mean, we'll work out from the property line inwards, so we'll leave the appropriate space and build towards the house, attaching to the existing bump out now on the second floor of the structure. I'm sure there's always a little, there's always a little bit of mistake in building a centimeter off here or there. So I'm not sure I understand. The carport itself will connect at the front of the house, and it should be about the same. Well, it gets skinnier going to the back anyway because it goes around the existing bump out. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I follow the questions there.
Well, you're on the property line right now. That's 2.99, but if the actual number is 2.97, your post will not be directly on the property line. They will be 0.02 away from your property line. So you're not going to a zero property line. You're going to slightly less than that.
Ah, okay. So I guess my comment was that. So for when we go to the permitting process, we'd have to update it to read 2.97 as the.
So you're
distance.
Am I correct, Mr. White, that we would revise this variance A to permit a reduced southerly interior side yard setback of 0.02 meters?
Oh, if we can, Mr. Chair, we carry the 2.97 to the back.
Yeah, that adds 0.02.
Yeah.
So it's not quite on the property line. It's 0.02 of a meter off the property line.
Sure, we might expand the roof to fill those 2 centimeters. Whatever gets us through the process, I'm fine with. For a 2 centimeter difference, I'm not gonna.
You comfortable with that, Mr. White? We go to 0.02 meters.
Yeah, it's just a discrepancy in plans, Mr. Chair.
That way everything lines up. All the numbers are the same.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay, so we'll make that amendment to variance A. So with that out of the way, please proceed with your application.
I love it. Okay, so I do have slides.
Well, we're
dead
making
simple.
decisions, and you're going to have to live with them. So we've got to be accurate.
No, I do appreciate that. My proposal is pretty simple. If you want to pull up my slides, I can quickly click through them here. So So you've all seen this. This is the area that we're proposing to amend within this red square box of our property. It is an open concept carport with just posts on the side, open front and back, built over the existing driveway. If you could click forward a slide, please. So we've actually covered the other two variances, but the two minor ones we're applying for are both pre-existing conditions that were flagged by the planning office when we were working, and my thanks to them. Margaret was super helpful in getting this together. So these both predate the city bylaws. This is for a landscaping strip between the two properties. I should note my neighbor has a 30-centimeter landscaping strip on the end of his driveway, so we actually do meet that requirement between us. And then the width of that front driveway section. If you click forward, please, one slide. These are the images which I supplied. So this is from Geo Ottawa, and obviously the flyover pictures from the 50s aren't great, but if you click back and forth, there's slightly different exposures, and you can clearly see the existing garage from 2015 still existed in 1958, and the driveway serving it was there as well. So this is actually Margot found this, and this highlights that this driveway has been in existence since before the bylaws in its existing condition. And she recommended that we apply as she said, an abundance of caution or courtesy. So that's it for these two. Yeah, pretty straightforward. I know you guys are certainly on top of all this. Next slide, please.
Most of the time we're on top of this.
Yes, I'm sure. This is my I didn't know what to prepare, so I threw.
Don't make assumptions that it's 100%.
Very good. And this is just showing the location of the carport, and then the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we've consulted with forestry. There's no trees or green space impacted. We've consulted with the neighbor on our property line. They have no objection. The rain runoff, as noted in the committee's comments, is directed well within our property line. And the carports are very consistent with the neighborhood streetscape character analysis, which we also had approved by planning. Something like 75% of the homes on our street have front-facing garages or carports. So that's it. I think it's pretty straightforward. I thank you all for your time.
So to be specific, we have to deal with the 4 tests of the Planning Act. If you'd like to just address them very quickly.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so for the 4 tests, so is the variance minor? Yes, I think it's quite minor. We're basically building a roof structure over top of an existing driveway. We're not impacting any greenscape, any landscaping, etc. And it's an area where we already have hardscape and park our car. Is it desirable for the appropriate development of the property? Again, I think so. It's consistent with the neighborhood character, and it allows us to access our car, load our car with children and shelter, which I think in Ottawa is something we all appreciate, and has no real negative impacts. Is the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw maintained? Yes, I believe so. We are consistent, as I said, with the neighborhood character and with the homes that have been built all around us, many of which are new builds or recent, would have gone through recent approvals. So I think it's consistent with the new zoning for our neighborhood with the new Westboro infill laws. And is the general intent and purpose of the plan maintained? I think so. We're a very green focused family, and we're happy that this isn't impacting any of the greenery or green space on our property, and will improve, I think, the water runoff and give us an opportunity to link better water runoff from what was there, which would always cool and freeze on our driveway. So in my opinion, my inexperienced opinion, yes, I think this meets the 4 points test.
And as far as your roof runoff is concerned, that's going to be directed away from your neighbor's property, given the fact that you're building almost exactly to the property line?
Yes, so we have a rain scupper that's built appropriately far in, and that will be redirected into, we're working with Rain Ready Ottawa and with our builders to build a soaking pool in the back.
And that's a flat roof, or that is a slope roof?
It is a flat roof, and there's a sloped roof on the 2nd floor that sticks out 2.5 feet. So the actual collecting area is pretty much the rain scupper and out to the edge.
There's no opportunity for falling ice.
No, certainly not on the neighbor's property. I think this will reduce that because our current eaves and whatnot drop a lot of ice around the driveway, and so this should hopefully make that a safer environment.
Okay, all right, thanks. I think Mr. White had a question regarding rear yard parking. Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if we could have the elevation drawing put up again. I just want to see the how the second story works in relation to the carport. Question of staff, does the upper story addition, which appears to be an addition, does that conform to the setback requirements of the zoning bylaw, the yard side requirement? And then secondly, for staff, my understanding that the official plan puts emphasis on in neighborhoods such as this in the interurban area, puts emphasis upon any parking being provided where possible in the yard rear area. I believe this property has a very substantial rear yard setback, rear yard area that obviously appears to currently accommodate a detached garage. Is there not merit in promoting rear yard parking in a rear yard garage as opposed to the carport that reduces the side yard to zero? And then I guess thirdly, maybe the applicant can answer this question. Has the adjacent property owner who would be most impacted by this been consulted, and what, if any, are is their position on the proposal?
Thank you, Member White. Through you, Mr. Chair, to answer the first question with regard to the second story addition. From staff's review of the plans, we believe that the second story would be compliant with the required setbacks for both the interior side yard setback and the eaves setback or projection allowance. And to address your second question, the front-facing attached carport is permitted under the zoning bylaw, as this was the dominant character determined by the streetscape character analysis. So we did not feel it was necessary to encourage a separate design, given that we didn't have any concerns with the interior side yard setback.
Thank you, Ms. Linker.
Mr. Chair, the question with respect to the consultation with the adjacent property owner.
Yeah, if I may. Yep. So two things. One, the extension to the house is actually already building permit approved and under construction, so that is all compliant. We didn't need any variances for that. In terms of consulting with our neighbor, yes, the neighbor on that shared property line is very supportive, has no issues. We've consulted with them recently, and I brought this process to their attention as well, and they said they have no issue and didn't have any comment to add. So they've been great. And then the last comment with regard to the rear parking, the existing garage was quite an old and small garage. It was too small to fit a car in. And so we always parked the car, and I believe previous owners did as well, along the driveway. We have torn down that garage and replaced it with a shed. We're very focused on building as much green space into the property as possible. So by formally putting parking at the side of the house, this actually expands the amount of green space where we can plant trees, etc., because we're going to be able to shorten the driveway, which before had to extend back to the garage. Now that that's just a shed, we can landscape all that, put in a rain soaking area, plant a tree, do those sorts of things. So we're actually just building a roof over existing hardscape, and we're increasing the amount of green space and canopy overall by being able to plant trees in that space.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Commander. Any other comments from members of the committee? Okay. Note that there are no comments from the Conservation Authority, Hydro Ottawa, standard comment regarding for servicing. Contact them, they're aware of that. There's no objections from neighbors. You indicated that neighbors are in support and that you contacted them in advance of this project beginning. And that's a good thing. Anyway, regarding this slightly amended application with a amendment to variance A, instead of 0 meters, 0.02 meters from the side yard setback for the carport. All in favor of the application as amended? Your application's approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye. We'll now deal with item 9 on the agenda, 41 and 43 Hampton Avenue. And this is an application to permit a front-facing garage for each half of a proposed semi-detached dwelling. I should say it's each half of a proposed semi-detached dwelling, which was approved several years ago. And the agent for the applicant is Mr. Paul Cooper. Is he there?
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mr. Cooper, for the record, your address, please.
My address is 6 Rouleau Street, Gatineau, Quebec.
Okay, before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. So, Mr. Cooper, you have an approved dwelling with a cantilever at the front for vehicle storage underneath, and there is now a design change to add garages. The planning department has concerns with the application, and if they would like to articulate those concerns, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The subject site is located in the inner urban transit, and it's an evolving neighborhood where in the official plan it is described as not to include or to limit automobile parking, concealing from the street and not forming an integral part of a building, such as in a front-facing garage. Also, these areas are encouraged to be developed with a focus on multiple model transportation methods, particularly walking and cycling. Also, mature neighborhoods overlay would describe that attached garage and carports are prohibited on the front facing of a dwelling unit where the streetscape character analysis is determined that the dominant character is absent. The subject area is the subject site is also located less than 750 meters from Tony's Pastures Outrain station. And therefore is the option to provide no parking or to consider other permitted parking options outlined in the regulations found in table like 140A in the bylaw.
Okay. All right. Well, the department is not happy with the front-facing garages in this redesign.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have some concerns.
Okay. All right, Mr. Cooper, you've heard from the department. If you'd like to make a brief presentation, please.
Yes, most certainly. Is it possible to have my slide deck brought up, please? So, apologies.
And just out of curiosity, while we wait for the rest of the deck to load, I noticed I'm looking at the your site plan that the garages are set back from the front wall of the house.
Yes, apologies for the doggies outburst there. Yes, Mr. Blatherwick, that is correct.
And how far back are those garages set back from the?
They're set back 2 feet, 0.6 meters, the required amount.
Okay, so.
Excellent. So if we could have the next slide, please. This is the context map for the proposed development in a R3K zone. I think, as previously mentioned, we have been before the committee and have received approval for a series of minor variances. We're back today with a revision to the original design to include front-facing garages, which we are aware, according to the zoning bylaw, are not permitted as per the streetscape character analysis, although we feel that in this case, although they're not permitted, we feel that they're still appropriate and desirable. And we are here today to make this the argument for the inclusion of these attached front-face garages, one on each side. So for a total of 2 variances total for the entire project. If I could have the next slide, please. And the next one, I guess we can keep going. And another, please, and another. So we understood that there would be concern from the planning department. We know that by rights, typically, because it's not permitted within the zoning bylaw, it's pretty normal that we should expect concern. And so we needed to ensure ourselves, first and foremost, that we had support from the neighbors. And this involved doing 2 and then probably more than 2 walkthroughs of the neighborhood by one of the owners. And I was present for the second walkthrough. And as a result of the walkthrough, we were able to determine that the people who are most immediately impacted by the proposal for front-facing garages, being the neighbors on the street, unanimously had no one had expressed and has since expressed concern relating to the proposal. In fact, we received significant support, which is demonstrated on this legend here, which shows that the cases of lots in green, admittedly our lot 43 is also shown in green, were in support. So that gives us 2, 4, 6, 7. Since the committee has also received a letter of support from 27 Hampton. So that gives us, 8 individuals along that street which support the notion of the front-facing garages in this case. Again, important to note that nobody had concern and nobody opposed the notion of front-facing garages. In fact, the resounding commentary we received was that people were often surprised that this was even a requirement. So if I could have
we have 4 letters on file of support and none objecting.
Yes, thank you. If I could have the next slide, please. We do believe that the 4 tests have been met, and I'll address the last 3 at the end of my presentation. I think the most important test that we would like to demonstrate is for the compatibility and desirability of the proposal. Although the streetscape character analysis clearly did not have a dominant character group allowing the front-facing garages on our section of the street, you'll note that all of the dwellings in red on the proposed attached neighborhood front-facing attached garage key plan show that the front-facing garages are very common and are very prevalent in the immediate neighborhood. We only showed 2 or 3 streets in this case, and we can see here that there are many, many examples which demonstrate that the front-facing attached garage is consistent, highly consistent with what's happening in the neighborhood. And I think what's interesting, although we were previously approved for the cantilevered parking space approach, because I would say it is not inconsistent with the development in the area, it is easily arguable that the front-facing garage is significantly more consistent and therefore more desirable in terms of compatibility with the neighborhood. If I could have the next slide, please. And then the next, please. And the next. And one more, and keep going. Apologies. Here is a comparative elevation that demonstrates, the front elevations and the front west and the rear east elevation. Here we're showing the front elevation for the proposed change to the front-facing garages. If I could have the next slide, please. And the next one, please. And again. And one more, please. Here's a perspective view from the street, which demonstrates, how the front-facing garages are seen from the street. Again, we've provided some articulation of the building form as well as kind of a nice covered porch covering, which extends over the parking spaces to help break down the form of the building as it is recommended in the design guidelines of the City of Ottawa. And it's consistent with neighboring properties, which also enjoy covered porches. Next slide, please. Here's a sort of more perspective view, which shows the same idea again as experienced from the street. If I could have the next slide, please. And the next. And another one, please. And another. Again, another view from the street demonstrating the proposed design. And the next slide, please. And here's just a quick view of the streetscape, demonstrating our awareness of this facing streetscape as well as the streetscape. Could I have the next slide, please? And here we have a comparative streetscape, which shows the previously approved version and the presently proposed recessed front-facing garage door. They're noticeably reasonably similar. If I could have the next slide, please.
What's the height limitation in this part of the neighborhood, Mr. Cooper?
The height limitation is 11 meters.
Okay.
So we've fully utilized the permitted height. We're a 3-story building. We've pushed the 3rd story back from the street significantly to help mitigate the sense of the apparent height of the building by pushing the building back and providing a southern exposed amenity area on that portion of the building. So although it's 3 stories, it has a lot more of a feel of a 2-story building. Could I have the next slide, please? Here we see a comparative views of the previously approved and the proposed design with the front-facing attached garages. We strongly believe that there are some downsides to the cantilevered parking spaces, being the likelihood of a much messier front yard appearance because of the lack of storage. We all recognize that, garages oftentimes are not only used for vehicles, but they tend to be used for the storage of the belongings of the residents. Without the provision of a significant storage area, although we were able to provide a small storage area in the previous approved design, there is concern that the side yards and the front yard will be more unsightly, with the greater likelihood of vehicles and objects being left, recycled bins and so on in the front yard. If I could have the next slide, please. And if we could go back to the previous one. Thank you. We also believe that from a sustainability point of view, the front-facing garage is preferable because the front-facing garage allows for an indoor heated space. We all know that there's a move towards sustainable initiatives, and it is shown that in the case of electric car charging, that car charging that is done in a partially heated or heated space is much more energy efficient. In this case, we would have partially heated garage areas. The other advantage environmentally of the front-facing attached garage is that we would have a significantly shorter exterior hardscape. The hardscaping is not terribly desirable from a sustainability point of view because it contributes to heat island effect. In both cases, we are proposing permeable paving because it is better for the environment, and my clients are committed to doing things which will have a net benefit environmentally. So we believe that for these reasons, that the proposal, although not aligned with the requirements in the bylaw, are still desirable and consistent. They meet the 4 tests. So the first test being that the intent of the official plan and new official plan regarding the benefit and manner of intensification have been achieved with the proposed intensification, a use of an existing underutilized lot. We also believe that the attached front-facing garage represents a greater intensification of the land use and therefore is more desirable. That the second test is met in that the intent of the bylaw has been met through the construction of a semi-detached dwelling in the R3 zone, where the purpose is to allow a mix of residential buildings from and forms ranging from detached to townhouse dwellings in areas designated as a general urban area in the official plan. That the variances requested are minor and are consistent with lots in the surrounding neighborhood, as evidenced on the image shown on Dev 7. They are also well within the purview of the Committee of Adjustment to approve. And again, we return to the compatibility tests, which we have spoken to, and we believe that this test demonstrates that the front-facing attached garage is in fact more desirable and more consistent with the existing fabric. And for that reason, the proposed application we're hoping will be approved. I thank you for your time, and subject to your comments, those are my thoughts.
So why wasn't this design applied for originally?
Yeah, thank you for your comment, Mr. Chair. It's a very good question. And quite honestly, the honest answer to the question was at the time that we made application, we felt, and from all of the people that I'm in contact with in the industry, is that the likelihood of being successful in our application was quite low. So the risk was very high that we would not be successful. And so for that reason, we chose to move forward with the cantilevered parking design, which we knew would be supported by the planning department. And so to be 100% honest with you, that is the answer to your question.
And what's changed making this more acceptable as far as we're concerned and the planning department is concerned?
I mean,
the front-facing garages are still not allowed on the street.
That's correct. They're still not allowed, but what we have been seeing is that there have been in some cases where it is deemed appropriate by the committee that the decisions have been rendered in favor of the front facing attached garages. And we feel that the purpose of this process is to evaluate the merits of the individual application. And so we don't rely on precedent. However, certainly knowing that there is and have been cases where there were approvals in the past have made it given us the more of a willingness to move forward and to attempt to see if we could get the amendment, because ultimately it's much more desirable, and from a development return perspective, although in this case the owners intend to occupy the proposed dwelling. So the Westinde family as well as the McDonald family intend to occupy this development. The value that parking a front-facing garage brings is significant, and it cannot be discounted.
And as far as the design change is concerned, and you said your initial response to my question was that these front-facing garages are set back 0.6 meters from the front of the house as per bylaw requirements. Could that be increased, that setback?
It's possible, but I would have to consult with the owners. I mean, because I think already we've gone with a reasonably shallow garage just because of concerns with the loss of interior space. So
how shallow is the interior? How deep is the space?
The garage itself is 18 feet finished in depth, which is as shallow as you'd like to have it. One of my clients has a Tesla, and that will be quite workable. The other drives a pickup truck, so it's going to be very, very tight. So I think it would be maybe as an absolute last resort, and I can't really speak on the spot to making that kind of a concession. Although I know that the variances are important to my clients, and so if it came down to it and it were absolutely necessary, then it perhaps is something that could be discussed.
Your front yard or your parking space in the driveway is legal size?
Yes, it would be.
Okay. All right. We have some questions from the members of the committee. Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little confused here with the policy with respect to parking. Could I ask staff, why is the ability to move vehicle parking inside and out of view of the street less desirable than forcing it to be located in full street view in the front of the building as was originally approved, and as the bylaw suggests it should be? I'm not understanding the principle here. If you have an ability, that obviously the proposal allows the ability to park the vehicle inside and out of view of the street, as opposed to the approved and I guess bylaw permitted parking, which would have vehicles forced to be parked outside in front of the building. I'm not understanding the principle of the bylaw provision.
Mr. Connell?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think the intention of that provision is to recognize the fact that often when we have front-facing garages, just as the applicant suggested, the vehicles don't actually end up in the garage itself, but parked in the driveway en route to the garage. So the intention of having the cantilevered section is to have that parking space not be the dominant feature of the home. The garage door is the other part of that that we look at in terms of how that prominence on the streetscape, and our preference to see that the front-facing door or the pedestrian realm maintains the dominant character of the area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With all due respect, I have to disagree with that position on the location of parking.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments from the members of committee? Mr. White, do we wish to reserve on this application?
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to support approval of the application myself, but
okay. No, I was just wondering if your level of concern was at the point when we reserve for the discussion. Okay. All right. Okay, I note that we have obviously have the department's comments in there. Still having concerns and not in support. There is no objection from neighbors. There are in fact letters of support from neighbors. This is a design change from, what was it, 2 years ago that you received approval on this build, Mr. Cooper?
It was last year around this time, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, your setback is 0.6 meters from the front wall, and you don't figure that you can afford any more space reduction in the interior of the garage?
I don't think reasonably that we could.
Okay. That's with the exception of the addition of the garage, the rest of the dwelling has the side or the rear yard, and the rear yard elevation remains the same.
Yes, that is correct.
And the side yard elevations, with the exception of the addition of the garages, which we have in our files, those are the changes that have been made.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Are we prepared to vote on this application? All in favor of the application for 41 and 43 Hampton Avenue to permit a front-facing garage for each proposed semi-detached dwelling? Okay, that's 3 in favor. Ms. O'Shara, your objection?
Yes, I agree with the planning department that this runs counter to the intent of the bylaw, so I'm voting against this.
Okay. So the motion carries 3-1. Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much. Good day.
Welcome. The final application on the agenda that we will deal with today is item 9, or item 7 and 8. 19A and B Garland Street. And I believe we have an agent that's going to propose and going to speak to us. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can you identify yourself, please, sir?
Sure. My name is Chris Davis. I'm an architect at Carrick Associates. We're the agent for the owner.
Okay. Mr. Paquette will not be joining us?
Yep, he's here as well.
Yes, I'm here as well.
Okay, so who's taking the oath?
I can.
Okay, all right, Mr. Paquette. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes,
I do swear.
All right. All right, this is an application on an as-built semi that this committee approved in October 2019. And it's to subdivide the property into 2 parcels with the existing long semi-detached dwelling with a reduced pole width and parking space length for both units. So we note that the planning department has no concerns with the application. Hydro Ottawa, well, Hydro Ottawa's, well, you're built, so Hydro Ottawa really, that's moot. Conservation Authority, same thing. There are a number of requested conditions, and we'll get to that after you make your presentation. We note that that one of the variances, this is variance C, as per the planning department, has been amended slightly, and it will now read to permit a reduced pole width of 1.65 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum pole width of 2.2 meters. You gentlemen are aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If you'd like to make a presentation regarding your applications for variance.
Sure. Could I ask that you skip ahead maybe 3 or 4? Keep going. One more? This one here. Okay, so the first 2 variances have to do with the a reduced parking space length from 5.2 to 4.6 meters. And these variances should have been requested at our original application, but there was an oversight and there's somehow missed by us and the planner. So we're applying for these now almost retroactively. And then the second variance.
So just to be clear, so for the record, mistakes were made by you folks and the planning department and not the committee of adjustment.
No, it wasn't the committee. We didn't apply for these. I don't even know if there were mistakes. There were more interpretations of the zoning bylaws. We didn't think that these spaces were required. So then when they were made, they were a bit smaller than they needed to be. But then when we realized when it's severed, they actually, in fact, will be required, even though parking isn't necessarily required in this area map. And then for an abundance of caution, we're applying for them now just to make sure everything is kosher.
So the minimum 5.2 meter parking space requirement when you're providing a parking space on a site in 2019 didn't apply?
We didn't. It was a debate whether or not the parking spaces were required, and then if they were required, if they had to meet the minimum standard, and we're told they did, and we should have applied for it at the time.
Those are your parking spaces, not the driveway, correct?
Exactly, and that was the thing. We're relying on the driveway at first, but then when we provided the garage, that became our official parking space, and then it didn't meet the requirement. And I should also note that 4.6 is required in the bylaw in some instances for smaller compact cars. So there is a precedent in the zoning bylaw to go down to 4.6, but in this case, it doesn't apply to us.
Okay, all right, please proceed.
Sure. And then the other variance that we're requesting has to do with pole width. And in this case, planning came back with the requirement that our independent services don't cross any property lines. So given that they're already existing, we needed to adjust the pole width to make sure that the property utilities do not cross any property lines. So it's just, we're amending it just to make sure that each property has their own independent services and not crossing any lines.
Okay. Ms. McLean, I think you had some questions regarding the parking situation at this site.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the car backs up, what's the distance of that future part 5, or what's the backup distance for a car coming out of the garage?
Would you have that, Adam? They're using these spaces now. They're using.
Well, how do they back up? I can't see if the car clears the garage door. Where is it backing up? How does it?
The garage door falls. The garage door falls on the inside face of the wall. So basically, where the blue line is, and I think they pull out and they do a bit of a 3-point turn and then they back down the driveway.
What's the distance? Can I get a distance between the blue line and the lot line?
Sure. Adam,
Yes.
pull that up.
Yeah, that distance is 13.4 feet. Roughly.
I think interestingly enough, in the last application, they were talking about the garage and they said a garage with 18 feet in depth was very shallow. And here you're proposing a garage depth of 15 feet. So it's interesting to hear the two submissions.
Right. I think it would accommodate a compact car.
Did you do any demonstrations that we would have of like a vehicle backing up? I forget what they call that kind of study, but I just.
Like a turning radius diagram?
The turning, yes, yeah.
I don't believe we have one in our presentation, but I do know they are using the garage now and it's working effectively. So Adam, we don't have a turning radius diagram, do we?
We don't have it in the presentation, but we did do studies and we used the 11'6" interior radius for the turn and the 19'2" radius for the outer turn. And a small vehicle will fit the standard turning radius into the garage.
So how do we assure that a small vehicle is if you come to sell these houses, how do we assure that a small vehicle, a person knows that they can only use, I guess they would see it, physically see it, yeah. Okay, I'll just leave it at that, thank you.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen, in 2019, your the original application that we dealt with to build this long semi, was there any parking proposed on site?
Well, so
yes or no?
There was,
yes. Was there parking proposed on site?
Yes, in the driveway.
In the driveway. Not in what was a storage facility with a door.
Right. And after we went through the process, the planner said, you're going to have to go back and apply for these retroactively because it was missed.
And we don't have turning radius study that proves to us that a vehicle in either of those now garages can actually enter and exit that space without any great amount of difficulty. You haven't provided us with that information.
We did not provide that, no.
Members of the panel, I really think that I am not going to be comfortable deciding on this until such time as I have proof that that parking arrangement will actually work. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chairman.
No, not Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry.
That's your panel, not this one.
I'm going back to my roots. So, I mean, if we do not approve this application with respect to the parking space length, the 2 parking spaces, we already have an existing development, right? Correct on that, I think. What, and it's being used presumably for parking, this space that we're talking about. What are the implications of that if we're not approving the application with respect to the parking? I mean, I think we're reduced full width provision. I'm assuming we're receptive to that.
I think that's an issue, Mr. White.
Yeah, we're receptive to that. But what are maybe staff can help me here. What are the implications of not approving the parking provisions?
Well, it's not necessarily not approving, Mr. White. It's having these folks provide us with a turning radius study that proves it'll actually work. So that nets an adjournment, not a dismissal.
Okay.
This panel has done this on this panel has done this on numerous occasions in the past.
Okay, we're not talking about making a decision with respect to we're talking about sufficient information to make a decision. Okay, I get you. Thank you.
Okay. So, Cheryl?
Oh, I'm just going to say that I think that sounds reasonable to see if we could adjourn and perhaps get that information from the applicant.
Yes, and especially if this panel is going to be consistent in our approach to this kind of matter. Ms. McLean, a 2-week adjournment to provide us with the information necessary to make a decision.
Well, I think the applicant, it's up to the applicants if they want to adjourn the application. But
right.
if they do decide to adjourn it, I would also like to see some photographs of the cars in there and maneuvering.
Sure.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm in favor of adjourning this for 2 weeks until such time as we receive better information, but it's your call.
Sure, that's fine by us.
Is 2 weeks sufficient?
It is. Is the next committee's meeting in 2 weeks, or is it usually 4 weeks?
It's Madam Secretary Treasurer, the next meeting is when?
The next committee meeting would be February 15th.
Okay.
And how are we for space on the 15th of February?
There's room available.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, if you put an application in to adjourn, we can adjourn and bring this back up on the 15th with the turning radius study in front of us and then make a decision.
Sure, we'd like to do that.
All right. All right, all in favor of adjourning this application until the 15th of February until we have further information regarding this application. Okay, the application is adjourned. We'll see you in several weeks.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that concludes the Committee of Adjustment agenda for the 1st of February 2023. I'd like to thank all participants in today's hearing, and the committee will now move to the reserve hearing to deal with the application we set aside earlier on in the afternoon. Thanks very much.